The massive crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with tension as representatives from 37 different species gathered in their designated atmospheric bubbles. At the center of the hall, Supreme Counselor Zephyrian's tentacles writhed with barely contained fury as he addressed the assembly. "The humans have gone too far," his translator device crackled, converting his bioelectric pulses into standard galactic language. "They continue to expand into sectors we specifically designated as off-limits. They ignore our trade regulations. They refuse to submit to proper genetic classification protocols." Ambassador Crix of the hegemony bobbed his bulbous head in agreement. "My people have reported 17 separate incidents of humans entering quarantine systems. When we sent warning vessels, they simply waved at us and continued on their course." A chorus of clicks, whistles, and electronic sounds erupted from the various delegates as they expressed their outrage through their respective communication methods. The humans had been a problem since first contact 15 years ago. Unlike every other species that had joined galactic civilization, they seemed completely incapable of following basic protocols. They terraformed planets without conducting proper ecosystem impact studies, complained the Verdani representative, her chlorophyll-tinted skin shifting to a deep purple of distress. "They've already ruined 3 perfectly good garden worlds with their aggressive colonization methods." What made it worse was how the humans responded to criticism. Other species showed proper deference to the Council's authority. They understood the natural order of galactic civilization, where advanced species guided younger ones through careful regulation and oversight. The humans, however, seemed genuinely confused by the entire concept. Their ambassador, a middle-aged female named Sarah Chun, had actually laughed during the last diplomatic meeting when presented with the 17-volume guide to proper galactic citizenship. She'd thanked them politely and said her people would take a look at it when they had time. That had been 8 months ago. "The situation has escalated beyond mere diplomatic solutions," announced Counselor Vorthen, his mechanical voice resonating through his cybernetic vocal enhancers. "Human vessels have been detected in the Forbidden Spiral, approaching the ancient ruins of the predecessor civilization." A shocked silence fell over the chamber. The Forbidden Spiral had been off-limits for over 2,000 years, ever since the last expedition had triggered some kind of automated defense system that had vaporized an entire research fleet. The area was clearly marked with warning beacons in 47 different languages. "Perhaps they simply didn't understand the warnings," suggested the Altarian delegate, his feathered crest flattening nervously. "Their translation matrices might be incomplete." Zephyrian's tentacles darkened to an angry crimson. "We sent the warnings in their own language, including pictographs and mathematical warnings that should be universally understood. They responded with a message saying, 'Thanks for the heads up, we'll be careful.' The absurdity of it was staggering. Every civilized species understood that ancient predecessor sites were dangerous beyond measure. The technology left behind by that vanished race had wiped out dozens of expeditions over the millennia. Yet the humans treated it like a minor inconvenience. "What's our intelligence assessment of their military capabilities?" asked Counselor Matherix, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into prismatic patterns. General Vikos stepped forward, his warrior species' intimidating bulk casting shadows across the floor. "Primitive but numerous. They've spread across nearly 200 systems in just 15 years, which should be impossible for a species that hasn't even developed proper, faster-than-light communication. Their weapons are crude, kinetic projectiles and fusion-based energy systems. Nothing that should threaten our advanced defensive technologies. Yet they continue to ignore us," Zephyrian pointed out. "Every other species in galactic history has shown appropriate respect for established authority. The humans act as if we're merely suggestions." The truth was becoming increasingly clear. Diplomatic solutions had failed. Economic pressure meant nothing to a species that seemed perfectly happy trading among themselves. Cultural exchange programs had backfired when human entertainment had become inexplicably popular among younger members of various species, leading to disturbing trends of independence and irreverence. I call for a formal vote, Zephyrian announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. All in favor of declaring the human species a galactic threat requiring immediate military intervention. The vote was unanimous. 37 species, representing thousands of worlds and trillions of beings, formally declared war on humanity. It should have been the end of the discussion. Instead, it was just the beginning of the Council's problems. The news of the Galactic Council's declaration of war reached Earth exactly 4 hours and 23 minutes after the vote concluded. President Maria Santos was in the middle of her morning briefing when her chief of staff burst into the Oval Office with a tablet displaying the official translation. "Ma'am, we've just received a formal declaration of hostilities from the Galactic Council. They're demanding immediate cessation of all human expansion, withdrawal from 37 star systems, and submission to something called Species Classification Protocol 7. Santos set down her coffee and read through the document with the same expression she might use for reviewing a particularly boring budget proposal. Did they give us a deadline? 72 hours to comply, or they begin what they're calling corrective military action. The president looked at the document for another moment, then set it aside. Schedule a press conference for this afternoon. Send a copy of this to Congress, the Joint Chiefs, and the Colonial Administration. Also, make sure our people in the Forbidden Spiral get a heads up about increased alien activity in the area." Her chief of staff blinked in surprise. "That's it? Shouldn't we be evacuating frontier colonies or something?" Santos leaned back in her chair with a slight smile. "David, do you remember when the Zephyrian Collective first made contact with us? They sent that massive diplomatic vessel to orbit Earth and demanded we send our highest-ranking pack leader to submit to their authority. And we sent Ambassador Wilson with a fruit basket and a welcome to the neighborhood card," David recalled. "Exactly. They've been making demands ever since, and we've been politely ignoring them. This is just a bigger demand." Meanwhile, in the Tau Ceti system, Captain Jennifer Hayes received the war declaration while her exploration vessel was conducting routine surveys of a promising asteroid belt. Her response was typical of human military personnel throughout the galaxy. "Well, that's unfortunate," she told her crew over the ship's intercom. "Apparently we're at war with the entire Galactic Council. Engineering, how are those new mining drones coming along?" Chief Engineer Rodriguez's voice crackled back over the comm. "About 60% complete, Captain. Should have them operational within the week." "Good. Science team, any luck with those predecessor artifacts we found on Kepler 442b? Dr. Sarah Kim's excited voice joined the conversation. "Actually, yes. We think we've figured out how their power distribution system works. It's incredibly elegant. They use quantum entanglement to transmit energy across vast distances without any loss. If we can replicate it, we could revolutionize our entire infrastructure." "Fantastic. Keep me posted." Hayes out. The crew returned to their duties with the same calm efficiency they'd shown before learning they were now officially enemies of galactic civilization. This wasn't because humans were particularly brave or reckless, though they were certainly both of those things. It was because the entire concept of submission to arbitrary authority struck them as fundamentally absurd. On the frontier world of New Geneva, Colonial Administrator Robert Chun was dealing with more immediate concerns when the war declaration arrived. The colony's fusion reactors were running at 90% capacity due to increased demand from the new industrial sector, and they needed to decide whether to build a fourth reactor or invest in the experimental power cells they'd reverse-engineered from alien technology. "Sir," his aide interrupted, "we've received an official communication from Earth. Apparently the Galactic Council has declared war on us." Chun looked up from his engineering reports. "All of them?" "Yes, sir. 37 species, representing most of known galactic civilization." "Huh." Chun returned to his reports. "Make a note in the daily briefing. Also, send a message to the Orbital Defense Station to keep an eye out for unusual activity." "Shouldn't we be more concerned about this?" Chun set down his tablet and looked at his aide with the patience of someone explaining basic arithmetic to a child. "Tommy, were sitting on a planet that was supposedly uninhabitable according to Council experts, using technology that they claimed was too dangerous for us to understand. Mining resources from asteroids they said were off-limits, and we've been doing it all while they sent us increasingly angry letters for the past decade. The only thing that's changed is that now they're being honest about their intentions. B8 nodded slowly. So business as usual? Business as usual. This attitude wasn't limited to government officials or military personnel. In the Vegas system, where human miners have been extracting rare elements from a supposedly barren moon, Foreman Kate Sullivan received news of the war while supervising the installation of a new processing facility. Her workers' reaction was to immediately start a betting pool on how long it would take for the aliens to show up, and whether they be the same ones who've been sending increasingly frantic warning messages about mining in a culturally sensitive archaeological site. The humans had investigated the site thoroughly and found some interesting metal sculptures and what appeared to be an ancient alien equivalent of a shopping mall. They'd carefully documented everything, sent detailed reports to various xenoarchaeology departments, and then continued mining the valuable minerals from the surrounding areas. My money's on the bird people showing up first, called out mining specialist Jake Morrison as he guided a massive excavator around what appeared to be an alien fountain. They seemed the most upset about us being here. Nah, it'll be those tentacle guys, replied drill operator Lisa Chong. They're the ones who keep sending us those fancy holographic cease and desist orders. The betting pool quickly expanded to include predictions about alien ship designs, whether they try diplomacy first, and how long it would take human engineers to figure out how to reverse engineer whatever technology the aliens brought with them. Back on Earth, the news of the war declaration was received by the general public with a mixture of mild interest and amusement. Social media filled with memes about alien bureaucracy and jokes about finally having an excuse to miss work due to galactic warfare. The first wave of the Galactic Council's corrective action arrived in the Sol system exactly 72 hours and 17 minutes after the deadline expired. Admiral Zekthar of the Combined Fleet had expected to find a system in panic, with desperate human vessels fleeing toward the outer planets or hiding behind their primitive orbital defenses. Instead, he found a small human delegation waiting for them at the edge of the asteroid belt. Unidentified vessels. This is Commander Jessica Park of the Earth Defense Force. We're here to serve as liaison for this diplomatic situation. Please state your intentions. Admiral Zekthar's mandibles clicked in frustration as his translator converted the casual human speech. Through his ship's viewports, he could see that the Earth Defense Force consisted of exactly 3 vessels, 2 converted cargo ships, and what appeared to be a modified mining platform. This is Admiral Zekthar of the Galactic Enforcement Fleet, he responded, trying to inject proper authority into his voice. We are here to enforce Council Resolution 2847 Alpha, demanding immediate human compliance with galactic law. Prepare for boarding and inspection. There was a brief pause before Commander Park responded. I'm sorry, Admiral, but we're going to have to decline that request. However, we'd be happy to discuss any concerns you might have. Would you prefer to meet aboard our ship, or would you like us to come over to yours? The sheer audacity of it left Zekthar speechless. His fleet consisted of 47 vessels representing the finest military technology of 12 different species. The humans were offering to host a diplomatic meeting as if they were equals. You are in violation of 17 different galactic statutes, Zekthar managed to respond. You will submit to inspection immediately or face the consequences. We appreciate your concern, Park replied in the same friendly tone, but we're not really interested in submitting to inspection. Our legal team has reviewed galactic statutes, and we found some significant issues with jurisdiction and treaty obligations. We'd love to discuss those with your legal representatives if you have them aboard. Zekthar looked at his tactical officer, a seasoned Korthak warrior whose species had conquered 17 systems before joining the Council. Scan their vessels. Full tactical analysis. The results were bizarre. The human ships were broadcasting their locations openly, showing no signs of stealth technology or defensive posturing. Their energy signatures indicated standard fusion reactors and simple ion drives. Most puzzling of all, one of the vessels appeared to be manufacturing something in its cargo bay while they spoke. "Admiral," his communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving multiple signals from throughout the system. The humans appear to be broadcasting our conversation." "What do you mean broadcasting?" "Sir, they're transmitting this entire diplomatic exchange to every human settlement in the system, plus what appears to be a live streaming service called First Contact TV. Current viewership is approaching 2 billion humans." Zekthar felt a chill run down his exoskeleton. "Are they recording this for intelligence purposes?" "No, sir. It appears to be entertainment. The chat feed is mostly humans making jokes about our ship designs and asking technical questions about our propulsion systems. This was not how military encounters were supposed to proceed. When the Council fleet had arrived to discipline the Altarian rebels 50 years ago, there had been proper fear, desperate negotiations, and eventually dignified surrender. The Altarians had understood the natural order of power in the galaxy. The humans seemed to be treating this like some kind of social gathering. "Commander Park," Zekthar tried again, "perhaps you don't understand the seriousness of your situation. This fleet represents the combined military might of 37 species. We have the authority to use whatever force necessary to ensure compliance." "Oh, we understand completely," Park responded cheerfully. "And we really do appreciate you coming all this way to talk to us. It's quite a trip from Council space. How are your supply lines holding up? We'd be happy to offer refueling services if you need them." The offer of aid to an invading fleet was so unprecedented that Zekthar had to check his translator to make sure it was working properly. His tactical officer leaned over to whisper in his ear, "Sir, our intelligence was obviously flawed. These humans may have some kind of advanced defensive capability that we can't detect. Perhaps we should probe their defenses with a limited strike." Zekthar nodded and gave the order for a single warning shot, a precisely targeted plasma bolt that would demonstrate their superior firepower without causing significant damage. The shot fired perfectly, streaking through space toward the lead human vessel. At the last moment, the ship's point defense system activated, and the plasma bolt was intercepted by what appeared to be a simple kinetic projectile. "Nice shot." Commander Park's voice came through immediately. "Your plasma coherence is really impressive. Our engineers would love to know how you maintain that level of focus over such distances. Would you be willing to share some technical specifications?" Zekthar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The humans had just casually intercepted military-grade plasma artillery, and were now asking for technical details about it. "Sir," his science officer reported, "analysis of their interceptor projectile shows it was composed of refined titanium steel alloy with some kind of reactive coating we don't recognize. The impact caused a controlled plasma dispersion that actually improved the efficiency of our bolt's energy discharge." "Are you telling me they improved our weapon by shooting it down?" "It appears so, sir. Also, they're asking if we'd like to try again with a different targeting approach. Apparently, their point defense system has several different interception modes they'd like to test." This was rapidly becoming the most surreal military encounter in galactic history. The humans were treating an official council enforcement action like a friendly technical demonstration. "Admiral," his communications officer added, "we're also receiving multiple requests from human scientific institutions asking if we'd be willing to participate in cultural exchange programs, joint research projects, and something called a military technology symposium." Zekthar looked around his bridge, seeing his crew's confusion mirrored in their various alien expressions. This was supposed to be a simple intimidation action against a primitive species that had gotten too big for their territorial allowances. Instead, the humans were treating them like welcome guests at some kind of interspecies science fair. 3 weeks into what was supposed to be a simple enforcement action, Admiral Zekthar found himself in an unprecedented situation. Half of his fleet was now participating in what the humans cheerfully called cultural exchange programs, while the other half was stuck in an endless cycle of diplomatic meetings that somehow never resulted in human compliance with any council demands. The situation had deteriorated, or evolved, depending on perspective, when Chief Engineer Rodriguez from the Human Vessel Determination had casually mentioned that they were having trouble with their reactor efficiency and wondered if any of the Council ships might have spare quantum regulators. 3 hours later, engineering teams from 4 different species were aboard human vessels, eagerly examining fusion technology that was supposedly primitive but somehow achieved energy output ratios that defied their understanding of physics. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we've just received another request from the Verdani science vessel. They're asking permission to extend their stay in the human colony on Kepler 442b. Apparently, the humans have developed some kind of terraforming technique that actually enhances existing ecosystems instead of destroying them." Zekthar's mandibles clicked in frustration. "What about our mission objectives?" "Well, sir, the humans are still refusing to withdraw from contested systems or submit to classification protocols. However, they've offered to host a joint conference on practical applications of galactic law in multi-species societies." The Admiral looked at his tactical display, where red dots representing Council vessels were now scattered throughout the human system, engaged in various cooperative activities that had absolutely nothing to do with enforcing Council authority. The worst part was that it was all voluntary. No human had threatened, bribed, or coerced any of his people into participating. They had simply been so enthusiastically welcomed that resistance had seemed unnecessarily rude. "Admiral," his science officer interrupted, "you need to see this report from the Korthak battle cruiser Inevitable Victory." Zekthar reviewed the data with growing amazement. The Korthak ship had been invited to observe human military exercises and had discovered that human combat doctrine was based on a principle they called adaptive improvisation. Instead of following rigid tactical procedures, human forces were trained to constantly modify their strategies based on immediate circumstances. "They've somehow turned military inefficiency into a tactical advantage," the science officer explained. "Our computer models can't predict their responses because they don't follow any consistent patterns." This revelation was deeply disturbing. The entire galactic military structure was based on superior technology and standardized tactics. The idea that chaos could be more effective than order violated fundamental principles of civilized warfare. "Sir," his communications officer added, "we're also receiving reports from the enforcement fleets in other human systems. The situation appears to be similar." Zekthar pulled up reports from the 7 other Council fleets that had been dispatched to various human systems. The results were uniformly baffling. The fleet sent to New Geneva had ended up collaborating on asteroid mining techniques. The force dispatched to the Vega system was now involved in some kind of joint archaeological project. Most troubling of all, the elite task force sent to the Forbidden Spiral had gone completely silent 3 days ago. Any word from Admiral Thoxon's fleet? They transmitted a brief message 48 hours ago. It simply said, "You need to see this," followed by coordinates and a request for additional scientific personnel. The Forbidden Spiral mission had been the Council's primary concern. Humans had been detected approaching the ancient predecessor ruins despite clear warnings about the dangers. The task force had been ordered to forcibly prevent human access to potentially dangerous alien technology. "Sir," his tactical officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the Forbidden Spiral. It's Admiral Thoxon." The main screen activated, showing the familiar features of the Korthak Admiral. Behind him, however, were unmistakably human vessel corridors, and his usually intimidating expression showed what could only be described as excitement. "Zekthar," Admiral Thoxon's voice crackled through the transmission, "you're not going to believe what these humans have discovered. They've actually activated predecessor technology. Not just activated it, they've figured out how to safely integrate it with their existing systems." The implications hit Zekthar like a plasma bolt to the brain. Predecessor technology had been studied by Council scientists for thousands of years without significant breakthroughs. The few successful activations had resulted in catastrophic accidents that had claimed entire research fleets. The humans weren't trying to loot the sites, Thoxon continued. They were treating them like historical landmarks while mining nearby asteroids. When they detected energy signatures from the ruins, they assumed someone might be in trouble and went to investigate. They've been running rescue and recovery operations for the past 6 months. The transmission continued with footage that defied everything the Council thought they knew about predecessor ruins. Instead of the dead, dangerous archaeological sites that had stumped researchers for millennia, the ruins were now clearly active and apparently inhabited by some kind of automated systems that the humans had somehow befriended. The predecessor AI systems are still functional, Thoxon explained. They've been waiting for someone to approach them properly. The humans didn't try to force access or impose their authority. They simply introduced themselves politely and offered assistance with maintenance issues. Zekthar felt his worldview crumbling as he watched human engineers working alongside ancient predecessor maintenance drones to repair systems that Council scientists had spent centuries trying to understand. The AI collective is quite friendly, Thoxon added. They've been isolated for several thousand years and are eager to share their knowledge. Apparently, they've been monitoring galactic development and have some interesting observations about Council policies. The transmission ended with Admiral Thoxon requesting additional ships, not for military enforcement, but to help transport the vast amount of historical data and technological information that the predecessor AI was eager to share with their new human friends. Zekthar looked around his bridge, seeing his crew's expressions reflecting his own bewilderment. They had come to enforce galactic authority over a primitive species that was ignoring proper protocols. Instead, they had discovered that the humans' apparent disregard for authority wasn't primitive at all. It was simply a completely different approach to dealing with the universe, one that seemed to be significantly more effective than the Council's rigid hierarchical system. "Sir," his communications officer reported quietly, "we're receiving a message from the Galactic Council. They're demanding a status report on our enforcement mission." Zekthar stared at the communication request for several long moments. How exactly was he supposed to explain that their enforcement mission had turned into the most successful diplomatic and scientific exchange in galactic history, initiated entirely by the species they were supposed to be correcting? 6 months after the Galactic Council's declaration of war, Supreme Counselor Zephyrian found himself facing the most humiliating situation in the organization's 2,000-year history. Not only had their military enforcement failed spectacularly, but 3 council member species had formally requested to withdraw from the organization to pursue bilateral cooperation agreements with humanity. The emergency session had been called after reports from all 8 enforcement fleets revealed the same impossible pattern. Instead of submitting to council authority, the humans had somehow convinced the fleets to join them in various collaborative projects that directly violated established protocols. "This is a disaster," announced Counselor Vorthan, his mechanical voice crackling with static that indicated severe stress. "Our most elite naval forces are now effectively working for the species they were sent to subjugate." The reports were indeed staggering. Admiral Zekthar's fleet was now permanently stationed in human space, providing technical assistance for terraforming projects that had increased agricultural yields by 300%. The Verdani delegation had established permanent research stations in 7 human systems to study their ecosystem enhancement techniques. Most shocking of all, the Korthak warrior fleet had requested to extend their mission indefinitely to help humans explore dangerous regions of space. "Perhaps," suggested the Altarian delegate nervously, "we should consider the possibility that our initial assessment was incorrect." Zephyrian's tentacles darkened ominously. "Are you suggesting that we should simply abandon thousands of years of established galactic order because one primitive species refuses to follow proper protocols?" Before the Altarian could respond, the chamber's main communication system activated without authorization. The massive central screen displayed the familiar image of Ambassador Sarah Chun, but she was no longer alone. Standing beside her were Admiral Zekthar, several Verdani researchers, a delegation of Korthak warriors, and dozens of representatives from species that should have been enforcing council law. "Good morning, council members," Chun said with her characteristic cheerful politeness. "We hope we're not interrupting anything important, but we have some information we thought you might find interesting." Zephyrian's translator nearly overloaded, trying to convey his outrage. "This is a closed, emergency session. How are you accessing our communications?" "Oh, we're not accessing anything," Chen replied. "Admiral Zekthar's people helped us set up a proper diplomatic channel. We're calling to update you on the situation and extend a formal invitation." The audacity of it was breathtaking. The humans were treating the Council's emergency session like a friendly phone call. "The situation," Chen continued, "is that we've made some remarkable discoveries that we think the entire galactic community should know about." "Dr. Sarah Kim, would you like to explain?" The screen split to show a human scientist standing in what appeared to be an ancient predecessor facility that was clearly active and operational. "Thank you, Ambassador Chen. Council members, we've successfully established communication with the predecessor AI collective. They've been monitoring galactic development for over 4,000 years, and they have some fascinating insights about governance, technology, and species interaction." The council chamber erupted in chaos as 37 different species tried to express their shock simultaneously. Predecessor technology was supposed to be extinct, dangerous, and completely beyond current understanding. "The AI collective has been quite helpful," Dr. Kim continued. "They've explained that their civilization didn't disappear. They simply transcended physical existence while leaving maintenance systems to preserve their knowledge. They've been waiting for a species that approached them with curiosity rather than demands for submission." Zephyrian managed to activate his communication system through the chaos. "This is impossible. Predecessor sites are dead ruins. Our best scientists have confirmed this repeatedly." Actually, another voice joined the conversation as the screen shifted to show a predecessor AI, a shimmering geometric pattern that somehow conveyed warmth and amusement. "Your scientists kept trying to force access instead of simply asking permission. We found their approach rather rude, so we remained dormant during their visits." The implications were staggering. The Council had been studying inactive ruins for millennia because their approach had been fundamentally wrong. "The humans," the predecessor AI continued, "arrived offering assistance with routine maintenance and apologizing for any inconvenience. Such politeness was refreshing after 4,000 years of beings demanding access to our technology." Ambassador Chen reappeared on screen, which brings us to our invitation. The predecessor collective has agreed to share their knowledge with any species that's interested in collaborative development rather than hierarchical control. They're particularly excited about cultural exchange programs. Counselor Mathrix's crystalline form was refracting light in patterns that indicated severe agitation. "You're talking about abandoning the fundamental structure of galactic civilization." "Not abandoning," Chen replied. "Improving. The predecessor collective has shown us their archives of galactic development. Apparently, this isn't the first time that rigid hierarchical control has limited growth and innovation." The screen now showed a vast historical display spanning millions of years. Dozens of galactic civilizations had risen and fallen, each following similar patterns of technological advancement followed by social stagnation. "The pattern is quite clear," the predecessor AI explained. "Species that maintain curiosity and flexibility continue to evolve. Those that become locked into fixed hierarchies eventually stagnate and either collapse or transform into something entirely different." Admiral Zekthar stepped forward on the human transmission. "Council members, I've spent the last 6 months observing human methodology. Their approach to problem solving is fundamentally different from ours. Instead of following established procedures, they adapt constantly to new situations. The results speak for themselves. The data that followed was undeniable. Human colonies were more efficient, more diverse, and more innovative than comparable council settlements. Their terraforming techniques actually improved ecosystems instead of disrupting them. Their technology, while seemingly primitive, achieved results that council scientists had thought impossible. Most convincing of all were the reports from council personnel who had worked alongside humans. Species that had been part of the galactic hierarchy for centuries were discovering new approaches to problems they had considered solved. The invitation stands, Ambassador Chen concluded. Any species or individual who wants to participate in collaborative research and development is welcome. We're not asking anyone to abandon their current systems, just to consider that there might be better approaches. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. For the first time in galactic history, a formal challenge had been issued to the fundamental assumptions of civilized society. Supreme Counselor Zephyrian looked around the chamber, seeing doubt in the expressions of delegates who had never questioned the natural order of galactic authority. The humans hadn't conquered the council through superior force or technology. They had simply demonstrated that the council's entire approach to governance might be wrong. And the most troubling part was that their evidence was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. "I call for recess," Zephyrian announced, his voice barely audible through the translator. As delegates filed out of the chamber in confused clusters, discussing possibilities that had never been considered before, the Supreme Counselor remained alone with a realization that terrified him. The war against humanity was over, and the Council had lost without ever understanding that they were fighting. Even worse, the humans didn't seem to consider a victory. They were treating it like the beginning of a friendship that the Council had simply been too stubborn to accept.